Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. A little later today. Thank you for sticking with us. Had some interviews and a lot of stuff going on today here at the studio, but all good stuff. And we'll tell you more about that very soon. But in the meantime, a big day in Syria in more ways than one, vis-a-vis Israel, but also this new jihadi government in Syria, which seems to be solidifying control day by day. And that's not a good thing, in my view. But let's start with the major story in Damascus today. And by the way, before we even get started, Damascus, especially for my biblically literate viewers, we have many. What's the first thing you think of when I say Damascus on this live stream? Now, most people say Isaiah 17 every time we talk about Damascus and just Syria writ large, but in particular Damascus, the Syrian capital. Everyone wants to talk about Isaiah 17. If you don't know what Isaiah 17 is, well, it's a prophecy regarding Damascus, which is one of the world's oldest inhabited cities. Yet it's never been destroyed. It's never been completely razed to the ground. Even the Mongols, I like to say, did not completely destroy Damascus. And yet, Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, chapter 17, verse 1 says that a day is coming when Damascus, can you imagine this, folks? Damascus will cease to be a city. It will become a ruinous heap. That's not me saying it. That's the word of God saying it. So I start with that, and I ask your thoughts there. Was that fulfilled? I don't know that it has been. It doesn't seem like it has been to me. Damascus still exists. Even during that bloody civil war over the past 15 years, it broke out in March 2011. Even then, the airport, for the most part, was up and running. Now, there were times over the past few years when Israel struck Damascus International Airport because it was used as a terror transit point by Iran and Hezbollah and the rest. But overall, look, Damascus is still a functioning city. I think that's undeniable. It has not, I'm taking the Bible literally, it says it will cease to be a city, meaning no more Damascus, a ruinous heap, completely ruined. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we've got one of the most educated audiences on YouTube, our watchmen and women on the wall. We've got an active chat here on the live stream. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's ever happened. I don't think there's ever been a time where Damascus was not on the map in some form or fashion, at least going back thousands of years. Let me know what you think. And I just preface what I'm about to report about what went down in Damascus today, because, man, I know there's going to be feedback and comments and chatter about Isaiah 17. So just laying that out there. What do you think? Because I'm asked about it. Folks, I have to tell you, when we're talking about the prophetic, and we delve into the prophetic a bunch on the channel, because, look, this is current events, breaking news, chiefly from the Middle East, but from an unapologetically biblical perspective. So many times when you're talking about the Middle East, you can't not talk about God's role in the region and the days to come and what prophecy says about it. So Isaiah 17 is near and dear to the hearts of many of our viewers here. So what do you think? I'm throwing it out there. Some may think it happened already. Some may think, okay, it hasn't happened. But here's the main question. Are we seeing the stirrings of it now? Is this the prelude to Isaiah 17? And I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but are these kind of birth pangs before the fulfillment of Isaiah 17? And a lot of people said when Iran was setting up shop in Damascus and Hezbollah that, man, they're going to precipitate this prophecy happening. Now Iran and Hezbollah have been evicted from Syria, essentially, by this new jihadi leadership. And you replaced one evil with another, in my view, obviously. So I don't think the chances have dimmed at all for Isaiah 17 to eventually, only God knows when, come to fulfillment. But let's talk about this new jihadi regime, because we had some events, interesting, kind of a twofer today, because we had events unfolding in Damascus that involved not only the old Iranian axis that used to be the main tenant in Syria, and then the new, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, as the WHO once said. Well, we're going to talk about the new boss as well. But Damascus today, the Israel Defense Forces struck what's being described as a nerve center, a command and control center for the Iran-backed, Iran-created terrorist organization, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, you might say, Stakelbeck, wait a minute, they're still around? Look, since October 7th, 2023, the massacre, which Palestinian Islamic Jihad helped Hamas in many ways carry out, we haven't heard too much about Islamic Jihad. We've heard a bunch about Israel going toe-to-toe with Hamas and tightening the noose around Hamas, but Islamic Jihad, also Gaza-based mainly, but with a presence in Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland, Islamic Jihad has been crushed perhaps even more than Hamas. Because remember, this is a smaller outfit than Hamas, not as formidably armed, but still very dangerous and well-armed with rockets and all the rest nonetheless. But it seems that Islamic Jihad, I've been saying that Hamas is in its death throes. It seems that Islamic Jihad has been all but snuffed out in Gaza. Now, we did see 2 weeks ago at the horrific, demonic, barbaric parade, I guess you could call it, the parading of the coffins of the Bibas family, little babies who Hamas murdered with their own bare hands and then celebrated in a just completely pagan, demonic display. We did see a few Islamic Jihad operatives there, but they have largely been more silent because they've largely been crushed, and that's a good thing. And yet, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, I mentioned Gaza and the West Bank, we call it Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland. These have been the main power bases for Islamic Jihad, but Damascus, if you know the region and you know Islamic Jihad and you know the support that was given to it by the Assad regime over the years, then you know that Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ for short, always had a very significant base in Damascus. And Israel noticed that and has been noticing it. And today, Israel took action against that base. Here you go from the Times of Israel. The IDF struck an alleged Islamic Jihad nerve center in Damascus that was said to be the leader of Islamic Jihad's house. A member of the terror group said that Zaid Nakala was not home at the time, and the building was, quote, empty when it was struck, though various reports say one person, perhaps as many as 3 people, were killed in this Israeli strike. Israeli fighter jets today, Thursday, March 13th, struck a residential building that the Israeli military said served as a Damascus headquarters for Palestinian Islamic Jihad to plan and carry out terror activities. Now, this was apparently a home of Zaid Nakala. Now, he has been the leader for some time of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're saying he was not there. And I wonder if the IDF was intentionally and specifically targeting him, thinking he was there, but he reportedly splits his time between Lebanon, Iran, and Syria. So he was in Damascus a bunch under the Assad regime. He's in Iran a bunch, his master's in Tehran, and he's in Lebanon a bunch, likely in Beirut, which was the suburbs of Beirut, obviously, have been a Hezbollah stronghold. So all of the main headquarters of the Iranian axis, the Iranian Ring of Fire, it seems that Zaid Nakala bounces from ring to ring, so to speak. Well, they missed him this time, apparently, but this may not be the last of the attempts on him, if this was specifically targeting him. And I say that because, in case you haven't noticed, since October 7th, past 17 months or so, Israel has had great success, and I mean miraculous success, in eliminating Hamas's leaders, Hezbollah's leaders, and top-ranking members of Iran's regime. So it does not extend, or it does not stretch credulity or belief to think that Israel may also go to the head of the snake in Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, it's deeper than that. And if you know, at Damascus, look, under Bashar al-Assad, again, I said, if you know the region, this is going back years. I mean, Damascus, and I hate to say it, it's a Bible city, right? The road to Damascus and much more. We can go on talking about the biblical history of Damascus. Folks, I hate to say it, but it was a terror hornet's nest. I'll use the same definition I've used for Gaza. Look, I think at one time there were the headquarters and offices of more terror organizations located in Damascus than any other place in the world, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you had Hamas, Islamic Jihad, you had practically every terror organization had set up shop in Damascus, which again is really sad because it's an incredible city with an incredible history and a rich biblical history dating back thousands of years. But Damascus has been abused and misused by terrorists, rogue regimes for decades now. And you wonder, Israel choosing today to strike this Islamic Jihad headquarters in Damascus, was some kind of plot in the offing? Was some kind of plot being hatched? Did Israel do this preemptively for a reason? We don't know. Or maybe it was, again, to specifically target Ziad Nakhala, the leader of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Apparently he wasn't there, but folks, you know, when it comes to terrorists and their responses to certain events, Ronald Reagan once said about the Soviet Union, trust, but verify. When it comes to the jihadis, don't trust, but verify. And we shall see. Maybe he was there. We don't know. But I could see Israel certainly carrying this out and specifically targeting him. It would be another terror leader bites the dust, which is never a bad thing, obviously. But there's a broader message here. Number one, the Iranian axis continues to be on its heels. The Iranian axis continues to be on the run and feeling the heat. That's clear. Look, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad was a crucial part of that Iranian ring of fire, which Israel has essentially turned into a smoldering heap of ruins over the past 17 months in the wake of October 7th. But the second big message here, and we've got some big developments on this front as well. I told you, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Well, we could say it's two sides of the same jihadi coin. You have the Shia side, Iran, Hezbollah, guests of Bashar al-Assad in Syria for years. Then on the other side, you have Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the very unpleasant chaps who now control Syria from Damascus. We're going to talk about them in a minute and some of their major developments. But before I do, quick reminder, if you like what you're hearing, again, current events, breaking news out of the Middle East mostly, but we'll hit all points around the world depending on what's going on. And if you like it from an unapologetically biblical perspective for such a time as this, be sure to subscribe to the channel here. Click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We're coming to you most weekdays and sometimes on the weekends, depending on the news cycle. And we just reached the 1 million subscriber mark a little while ago, and we continue. God continues, I should say, to expand what we're doing, again, because we've got a message of truth in times of universal, seemingly, deceit. As George Orwell once said, telling the truth can be a revolutionary act. That was George Orwell. So we're trying to do that here every day. And we'd love for you to be with us every day because there's a lot going on. In case you haven't noticed, we live in momentous, massive, perilous, but biblical times. Okay, let's talk about this new jihadi government in Syria and what they've been up to. Now, we started the week, the big news from Mohammed al-Golani and Hayat HTS, which is the group, the main jihadi group and al-Qaeda offshoot, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, pardon me, been a long day. HTS, we'll just call them HTS for short. We started the week talking about how HTS and its minions went on a rampage in northwestern Syria, largely ignored, surprise, surprise, by the mainstream media, but they slaughtered over 1,000 people, religious minorities. Remember, HTS, they're Sunni jihadis of the al-Qaeda ISIS ilk. They're a literal offshoot of al-Qaeda. Their leader, Mohammed al-Golani, he now calls himself Ahmed al-Shara. He's trying to recast himself as a moderate. He wears a suit and tie now. It's really quite hilarious. He's al-Qaeda through and through. He sent his hordes to northwestern Syria where they slaughtered over 1,000 people, including hundreds of Christians, reportedly, intentionally targeting Syria's ancient Christian community, along with Alawites and other religious minorities. revealing his true face. That's how the week started. The week progressed or regressed, depending on how you look at it, with news now of a deal struck between HTS and the Sunni jihadis and the Kurds in Syria. That's a big deal. The Syrian Democratic Forces have been at loggerheads for years with the various jihadi forces. Now, the Kurds have pretty much carved out an almost autonomous territory, not almost, it has been, an autonomous territory in northeastern Syria. Now they've signed, and again, Turkey is the real wild card here, backing the Sunni jihadis, more on them in a minute. And Turkey is an avowed enemy of the Kurdish people. Well, now the Syrian Kurds have signed a deal with the Syrian central government led by the jihadis to come into the fold, apparently, and be a part of greater Syria. I'm a bit shocked by it. I have to say, the U.S. apparently has pushed for the deal. And I think that the thinking in the Trump administration is, look, we want to get out of Syria. There's still, I believe, 900 U.S. soldiers there. I think Trump is saying, our work is done there. It's an absolute mess. If it's not Iran and Hezbollah, it's Al-Qaeda and ISIS. We'd like to depart Syria. So I think the Trump administration's thinking is, look, if we can bring all these feuding factions in Syria together into a relatively cohesive nation state, then it makes our job getting out of there easier. We're not bogged down in Syria. I get it. Let's see how this pans out, because again, don't trust and verify when it comes to jihadis, and the Trump administration knows that. They're very, very smart people who know what they're doing. They know the region. He's got incredible foreign policy, and he's got, I should say, incredible foreign policy team working for him. So, but we shall see what happens here. The Kurds, obviously, again, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is the leader of Turkey, who is Muslim Brotherhood through and through, who's the main backer of these Sunni jihadis in Syria, he's got an almost obsessive hatred for the Kurdish people. And he wants to be the man in Syria. He sees HTS as basically his proxy. Because remember, this is important. We've had a few waves over the past, say, 15 years alone. It began with the Arab Spring, which quickly devolved into an Islamist winter. But you had regimes toppling. It looked like the Muslim Brotherhood was ascendant, and they were for a time in Egypt, Tunisia, and elsewhere. And that got Erdogan very excited because he's a Muslim Brotherhood guy. The Turkish branch of the Brotherhood is Justice and Development Party. So he's thinking, great, I want the return of the caliphate. You might say, funny word you're throwing out there. The caliphate, think of it as a united Islam, all Islamic states, all Muslim nations united into one all-powerful entity. That's what it is. And it's led, the caliphate is led by the caliph. He's kind of the supreme leader of the caliphate. Erdogan fancies himself as a modern-day caliph. And he'd love to see the return of the caliphate. He'd like to preside over it. Because remember, the caliphate, the seat of the caliphate for over 500 years was in Turkey, the Ottoman Empire. Ring a bell? The Ottoman Empire disbanded in 1924 officially, and with the caliphate did, the Ottoman Empire before that, but shortly before that, World War I. But the caliphate disbanded officially, the last known caliphate, in 1924. Okay, fast forward. All of a sudden, Turkey is secular for decades, are a loyal ally of Israel and the United States. And then comes the Arab Spring, Muslim Brotherhood ascendant. All of a sudden, Erdogan's saying this is great. The caliphate's being formed. But then it collapses. In Egypt, Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood leader, overthrown. Tunisia, eventually the Islamists are booted out. And all of a sudden, things aren't looking so hot for the caliphate. But then shortly thereafter, 2014, 2015, 2016, ISIS becomes ascendant. They call themselves the Islamic State. It's a caliphate. And they form a mini caliphate. Some 58,000 square miles of territory stretching across Iraq and Syria, an area the size of Great Britain. And Erdogan helped facilitate that. Look, we had foreign fighters from Europe, from the United States, flowing into Syria across the border from, you guessed it, Turkey. Erdogan saying to himself, look, I'll let the jihadis do the dirty work and conquer the territory, then I'll just come on in and I'll rule over it. They will form the physical caliphate, and then we'll just come in and we'll rule it. You have to remember, the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda, ISIS, different tactics. Al-Qaeda, ISIS want to kill you now, blow you up now. The Brotherhood, suits, ties, playing the long game. They work in the political process oftentimes, but the end game is the same. The return of the caliphate and Islamic Sharia law for one and all, whether you like it or not. So Erdogan thought this is great. I'll utilize that. And then President Trump kept his word, smashed the ISIS caliphate. And then you had Iran and the Ring of Fire really ascendant over the past several years. And Erdogan would cooperate with them. He's a huge supporter of Hamas, which makes sense because Hamas is the Palestinian branch of, you guessed it, the Muslim Brotherhood. But Iran was a direct challenger for Islamic supremacy to Turkey. And then the Iranian Ring of Fire was smashed and Iran was evicted from Syria, and jihadi forces once again became ascendant. And Erdogan said, here's my third chance. Will the third time be a charm? The Arab Spring collapsed. ISIS collapsed. Now, Syria, we have new stirrings. Could Syria be the vehicle that he uses to try and exercise more influence over the region and return those glory days of the Ottoman Empire? We shall see. But that's a little bit of the backdrop for you. And it's important because also I mentioned the Kurds and this deal signed with HTS, but the leader of HTS, Mohammed al-Golani, aka Ahmed al-Shara, apparently announced today that it's a transitional period, a 5-year transitional period in Syria, where Syria will be governed by Islamic law, Sharia. Again, whether you like it or not. And if you know anything about Sharia, you know that it is draconian and oppressive. And if you're not a Muslim, life will not be very pleasant for you under Sharia. And if you are a Muslim who's not radical, life also won't be pleasant for you under Sharia. But it seems that will be the law of the land in Syria for a 5-year, quote unquote, transitional period. Guess what, folks? I think it's going to be more like, if they have their way, and I hope they don't, more like an indefinite transitional period. Let's put it that way. So some major events happening in Syria, which brings me to Israel's defense minister, his name is Israel Katz, confirming, yes, the Israeli Air Force did strike that site in Damascus today, that Islamic Jihad, the site that we discussed a minute ago. And he said, wherever terror activity against Israel is organized, the extreme Islamic leader al-Jolani will find the Israeli Air Force aircraft flying above and striking terror targets. I mean, Israel is not playing games with this new jihadi regime in Syria. The lessons of October 7th have been fully internalized and taken note of. And that's why Israel, the world should be thanking Israel. I keep saying it. Shortly after these jihadis seized power in December, Israel simultaneously really destroyed Bashar al-Assad's military arsenal so that the jihadis could not get their claws on it. Thank you, Israel. Because could you imagine, I mentioned that massacre earlier this week of Christians and religious minorities. Could you imagine if they had tanks and fighter jets and chemical weapons and ships to conduct these massacres with? How much worse it would have been? That's why Israel, thank God, preemptively struck. And again, thank God that Israel did. The world owes Israel, just like it did in 1981 when it destroyed Iraq's nuclear reactor, just like it did in 2007 when it destroyed Bashar al-Assad's nuclear reactor, and just as eventually Israel will very likely do once again when it destroys Iran's nuclear facilities. The world should be thanking Israel, but it won't. We know how that goes. But look, the God of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps, and that is the key. But look, Israel also created that buffer zone on the Syrian side of the Israel-Syria border. Again, I said the lessons of October 7th have been internalized, folks. Never again will Israel allow itself to be caught unaware. Now, my biblical scholars and prophecy buffs would answer that saying, what about Ezekiel 38 and 39? You're right. A land of unwalled villages. And it seems that this latter days, that's what Ezekiel calls it, latter days confederation that comes against Israel, it will be a surprise. But for now, at least, Israel is saying, whether it's Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, we're creating buffer zones between the bad guys and Israeli citizens, considerable, heavily armed buffer zones. October 7th will not happen again on our watch. That's what Israel's saying right now. And you're seeing those clear warnings, this jihadi regime in Syria, Israel saying, don't even think about it. You will not be long for this world. And again, the world should be thanking Israel. And you see once again why Israel is the first line of defense for Western civilization, for Judeo-Christian civilization and the free world, a free world which doesn't, again, thank Israel or have many warm feelings for the world's one and only Jewish state. It's really sad, but it's not surprising. Think of the book of Zechariah, chapter 12, which says, Jerusalem will become like a burdensome stone for all people, and the entire world will be gathered against it. We see the prophetic chess pieces moving on the board, and it's exciting to be here with you every day, watchmen and women on the wall with us, and be able, it's a privilege really, to be able to report on all this with you and walk shoulder to shoulder with you through it all together. Hey, speaking of which, by popular demand, the Watchman merch, wanted to mention that real quick, 50% off now. Hats, t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, 50% off. Show your support for the channel, all the stuff we're doing here. It's shop.tbn.org. That's shop.tbn.org. And for literally for years since we launched the channel, people say, hey man, I want a hat or a hoodie or a t-shirt, just something cool to show my support for the channel and show my friends and let people know. It's a conversation piece. What's the Watchman? Who's a Stakelbeck guy? Tell them who it is. All of a sudden they start watching and they get educated, and hopefully the main goal is to draw them closer to the Lord. So if you like the merch, 50% off, great deal right now. Check it out. Hey, if anything happens, and I'm sure it will because this is the Middle East and the Middle East never sleeps, but you can bank on it. We'll be back with you tomorrow. And again, honored and a privilege to be with all of you on a regular basis. It goes without saying, for such a time as this. And where was that phrase coined? Book of Esther, ancient Persia, modern day Iran, Purim. Tomorrow, really today, I think it started, the people of Israel are celebrating Purim, that incredible holiday, a festive, they dress up, it's a lot of fun, but it's also solemn in a sense because Haman, the villain of the Purim story in the book of Esther, that spirit of Haman still survives today, even in modern day Persia, Iran. Isn't that something? But God's in control. Happy Purim to all my Jewish friends around the world. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.